Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k Tyranids. We've got another bite-sized review for you today, and it's going to be one of the Carnifex models, which is the Screamer Killers from the Tyranid Codex. Now these are a heavy support option, coming in at 7 power level or 130 points. You can get a unit of up to 3 of them, which is pretty unique for the Codex itself. Now as for the actual datasheet characteristics, they're moving 10 inches, weapon skill 3+, ballistic skill 4+, strength 6, toughness 7, wounds 9, attacks 10, leadership 6 and a 2+ armor save. So pretty quick for a heavy support, plenty of attacks with 10 attacks at the base characteristic anyway, and a 2+ armor save on top of that. Not too bad in terms of the stats at all, and the fact that you can take up to 3 of these could actually make them an absolute battering ram. As for the keywords of note, they are a monster and they have the core keyword, as well as the Carnifex keyword of course as well. So each Screamer Killer is equipped with 1 Bioplasmic Scream and 4 Screamer Killer Talons. So let's first go over the Bioplasmic Scream. This is an 18-inch range weapon, it's Assault D6, Strength 8, -4 AP, 1 damage with the Blast ability. Now this thing does have a 4+ ballistic skill, so it will miss with half of the amount of shots that it has. 18-inch range isn't a problem because this is actually a melee monster anyway. However, there are 3 problems I can see with this range weapon. The first one is only D6 shots, very unreliable, very unpredictable. Second of all, damage is only damage 1, so even though it's got a really high strength of strength 8 and -4 AP, the damage is very under par. And the third problem is the fact that it's got the blast ability. In some situations this is actually a benefit, but I personally think it's actually not a benefit. It restricts the model. Once it gets into engagement range, it can't actually fire the weapon because you can't fire blast into engagement range whether you're a monster or not. Normally monsters can fire into combat, but not with the blast ability. So unfortunately it's just a so-so weapon for me. Now as for the Screamer Killer Talons, they're hitting on a 3+ this time because the weapon skill is a 3+, strength 6, and you're going to be getting 10 attacks with that, -3 AP and 3 damage. That's where this thing comes clutch. There's a lot of attacks, a lot of AP, a lot of damage. So yeah, ideally you want to be getting these into close combat. Now as for some Wargear options, the first one of the 3 is the Adrenal Glands, 10 points, you're going to get a +1 to the movement, so you'll be moving 11 inches rather than 10, and also you're going to add 1 to the strength characteristic, which will make it strength 7, so you're now wounding toughness 7 models, whether it's vehicles or monsters, you're wounding them on a 4+, and there is a way to further that which we'll get onto later in the video. The second option here is a Spore Cyst, they're 15 points, and you're effectively giving your Screamer Killers light cover against range attacks. I mean, it's already got a 2+ armor save, and there are ways of doing other things with Feel No Pain saves from the Catalyst Psychic Power or invulnerable saves. Again, we'll go on to that later in a moment, but having a light cover save is going to negate a bit of AP at range. And the final one here for 5 points is the Toxin Sacs. Unmodifiable hit rolls of a 6 will automatically wound the target. You've got 10 attacks, so yeah, 1 or 2 of them may be a 6. But this will also interact with a stratagem, with the Gorgon stratagem. Let's make our way through the abilities that the Screamer Killers have. So the first is the Armoured Ecoskeleton. This is a Carnifex ability. Each time an attack is allocated to this model, subtract 1 from the damage characteristic, so -1 to all damage taken, which is pretty good when the model's already got 9 wounds with a 2+ armor save. It's going to be really resilient, and that's a really good ability. The second one, Blistering Assault. Whenever it makes a charge move or performs a heroic intervention, you can add 1 to the attacks characteristics of this model, so giving it 11 attacks rather than 10 on the charge. Pretty good. Again, we've already gone through those stats, strength 6, -3 AP, 3 damage, not too bad at all. Another one is Terrifying. So when your Screamer Killers destroy an enemy model, until the end of the turn subtract 1 from the leadership characteristics of models in that unit to a maximum of -4. Now versus some armies this isn't going to do anything, versus others it's going to be pretty decent. -4 is quite a lot. I mean, even Necrons that have got a leadership value of a 10, taking them right down to potentially a leadership value of a 6, and obviously you're minusing more because you've actually destroyed some enemy models in the process. This is going to work wonders against some factions. Now Monstrous Brood is the next ability. When the unit is first set up on the battlefield, it doesn't have to be within unit coherency of the other Screamer Killers within the unit. Now you still have to set it up wholly within 6 inches of the other models within the unit, but then they will be treated as independent units, separate units throughout the rest of the game. So that's a positive as well as a negative. The positive is they can split off and do their own things, but when you're buffing the unit with core abilities or stratagems, it's only going to work on 1 of the monsters rather than all 3 of them. And then the final ability is a monster ability, Death Throes. When you lose this model, roll a d6 on a 6+, the closest eligible unit within 3 inches suffers 1 mortal wound. So a nice mini explosion there, a last send off from our Screamer Killers. Next we talk about the adaptive physiologies. Now we already mentioned one previously, we didn't go into much detail about it, but you could obviously take the dermic symbiosis, which is a 4+ invulnerable save for one of your monsters for 25 points. So yeah, this is only going to be one of your monsters, even though you potentially could have 3 in the unit, only one model can actually take this. The second one I want to mention today is the Precognitive Sensoria, which is effectively the fight first ability for that one monster. Predator Instincts is the third one I want to discuss today. Gives it the eligibility to heroically intervene as if it was a character, and you can do it within 6 inches horizontally and 5 inches vertically. A 6-inch heroic intervention is absolutely massive, especially on a monster this size. I mean, the bases are pretty big for the Screamer Killers. You want to get them into a fight, want to get them into engagement range, especially if it isn't your turn. And the last one I want to mention here for the adaptive physiologies is the Vicarious Ammunition. When you're making your shots in the shooting phase, select one unit that was hit by one or more of these attacks, roll a d6, on a 2+, they suffer d3 mortal wounds. That one's 15 points. It's effectively like having a smite attack on top of your range attacks. I think that one's pretty decent, scoring an average of 2 mortal wounds every time you hit a unit. Right, let's talk about some Hive Fleets next. I mean, these units kind of work with all of the Hive Fleets, if I'm honest with you, because they can hit in melee as well as shoot at range. But the one I wanted to mention is the Hive Fleet Behemoth. On the charge or performing a heroic intervention, you're going to get a +1 to your strength characteristics. And if you remember from the adrenal glands, you can also get another +1 to your strength that way. So once you combine those, you can actually have these guys at strength 8, -3 AP with 3 damage with a buttload of attacks. I think that one's a really good combination. Now you also get the adaptive, which is a re-rollable charge roll, which is also pretty good. But if you wanted to, you could swap out for either the Hunt biomorphologies or the Lurk biomorphologies. From the Lurk list, Territorial Instincts is one, giving it objective secured. Now unfortunately your Screamer Killers do not have a wounds characteristic of a 10 or more, so they're not going to count as 5 models each. But you could still have a unit of 3 of them, and all 3 of them will have objective secured. But yeah, I think the best option here is the Behemoth Hive Fleet. Right, as for some stratagems of note, I've got a few battle tactic stratagems to begin. Ferocious Appetite for 1 command point used on a Hive Tendril monster, allowing him to reroll all the wound rolls in melee. I think for 1 command point, when you've got 10 or 11 attacks depending on the charge, having a reroll to all of those could be pretty good. Indomitable Monstrosity for 1 command point, again used on a Hive Tendril monster. You can't wound him on less than a 4+. Now the Leviathan Hive Fleet has this naturally, but of course Screamer Killers are not synapse monsters, so therefore they're not going to have the ability on a 4+. It will be actually a 3+, and that's going to be strength 8 onwards anyway, so I think you're better off just taking this stratagem rather than the Leviathan Hive Fleet. And the last one from the battle tactic stratagems is Adrenal Surge for 1 command point. When an adrenal glands unit has made a charge move, add 1 to the attacks characteristics of all models. That's for non-monsters, but if you are talking about monsters, which we are, you're going to be adding D3 attacks. That's with adrenal glands. So you're paying 10 points for the adrenal glands, you're getting D3 extra attacks. If you make the charge move, you've already got 1 additional attack because of the ability he has. So potentially you can actually have 14 attack from your Screamer Killers just for 1 command point and paying 10 points for the adrenal glands. And bear in mind this works for a unit as opposed to working for a single monster. One last stratagem before we get into the pros and cons is Overrun, which is a strategic ploy stratagem for 1 command point used on a core unit. If this model made a charge move in this turn and there are now no enemy units within engagement range because they've been finished off by either your Screamer Killers or other units within the same fight, then this model can make a normal move. So a normal move here is a 10-inch movement. You can get it into close proximity of another unit. Maybe you want to get it onto an objective or do an engagement or front or something like that. But you can get it around the battlefield 10 inches. Could set you up nicely for your next turn. Right, let's get into the pros and cons for the Screamer Killer, starting with the pros. The stats do not degrade because they've got 9 wounds, so they're not going to have degradable stats. Pretty good. They've got a movement of 10 inches. That's pretty rapid for a heavy support option. You can have units of up to 3, and then they can actually be separated if you wished. You get 10 or 11 attacks depending on if you made the charge move. They are core, so they're going to interact with other abilities from your characters, as well as that overrun stratagem that we just mentioned in fact. They've got a 2+ armor save with a -1 to all damage, so they're very resilient, especially if you've got 3 of these. That's a lot of tankiness with this unit. They're dealing damage at range as well as in melee. They're hurting enemy leadership, which I think is a really good underrated ability. And it is capped at -4, but -4 is still quite a lot. You've got the option of the adaptive physiologies and also Old One Eye, which we didn't actually mention in this video. If you're taking Old One Eye alongside your Carnifex units, he will grant a +1 to your hit rolls. That's in melee and at range. As for the cons, you can't fire blast into engagement range unfortunately, so if he does get tagged in combat or he's in combat on his own accord, you're not going to be firing in your shooting phase with your blast weapon Now he's only toughness 7 versus other monsters that are toughness 8 in this codex, so he's a little bit less resilient in that sense, but I still think they're pretty resilient overall. There's no weapon options here, it is what it is with the datasheet, and you're hitting on a 4+ with a ballistic skill, which I think is a bit under par. I mean, that is what Carnifex is hit on anyway, and this isn't really a shooting monster anyway, so I'm not too bothered about that, but we're still going to put it as a con. You're getting D6 amount of shots, which is a little bit unreliable, and only 1 damage each. Again, not very reliable there in terms of the range attacks. And doesn't have the Carnifex Wargear. Now if you look into the Carnifex datasheet, they've got the options of Acid Maws, Enhanced Senses, the Tusks, the Chitin Thorns. The Screamer Killers don't have any access to any of those because they're virtually a pre-built Carnifex model. But let's get on to the Planet 40k rating today for the Screamer Killers. I think they're really good, and I'm going to go with a Planet 40k rating of 4 stars. So guys, on your exits, remember to subscribe to the channel if you are new around here and enjoying the content. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.